everyone, I'm Kevin with Victory 4x4. Today in the garage we're going to be installing a set of our strike sliders on our 23 Sequoia TRD Sport. Before we can get started, we'll have to remove the factory steps if your vehicle is equipped with those. For that, we're going to kind of need to get underneath, and there's 8 bolts that will be removed. For this, you'll need a 12mm socket, and in the outside 2 mounts, you can loosen the top bolt and then remove the remaining 6. With those removed, the slider will kind of hang down on those 2 remaining bolts, and you can then slide it toward the rear of the vehicle and get it out of the way. After you get that out of the way, it's a good idea to just reinstall the hardware to prevent the introduction of any corrosion inside of these rocker panels. Next, while you still have that 12mm socket, you can come down here and remove this bracket and 2 screws holding it into the frame. Then out here, specifically on the passenger side, you'll have this ground strap to remove temporarily. Same socket, 12mm. And then you can grab a screwdriver or a clip removal tool and pop this clip out of the frame. Then on the side of the frame, between the rear lower control arm mount and the front body mount, you're going to have 4 of these plastic plugs that can be removed using a flat screwdriver or a panel tool. Now on the bottom side of the frame rail, you're going to have a few holes to open up with a drill. The 4 larger ones that I'm kind of trying to mark out here are all going to be opened up to 11/16 to accept a 1/2" rib nut. And then back here, just in front of the rear control arm mount, there's a roughly 5/16 diameter hole that you'll need to open up to 7/16, and that one will get a 1/2" thread cutting bolt. When drilling these out, a unibit or a step bit like I have here works really well. You can do this obviously with a conventional drill bit, as you're kind of already opening up a pretty large hole. Once you have that opened up to 11/16, grab one of those 1/2" rib nuts from your bolt pack and just double check the clearance and fitment into the hole, as well as kind of remove any burrs or anything you may have left over here so it has a nice flat seating surface when it's tightened up on the frame. With those front 4 opened up, while we still have the drill, we'll come back here to this rear hole and drill it out to 7/16. Now, when you go to install the 1/2" rib nuts, there's a few different ways to do it. We provide you with a tool. You can purchase several different tools. This is one that we purchased online. It works great. You simply open it up, thread the rib nut on. Obviously, this is going to come with manufacturer instructions as well to kind of more familiarize yourself with it. But if you already have one of these, you're probably pretty familiar. You thread it on, you put it into the hole, and simply squeeze the 2 handles together. That essentially crimps the rib nut into place on the frame. You then, with this style tool, back the center out using this thumb wheel and can move on to the next one. So that's pretty quick and easy. The tool we provide consists of a 2" long 1/2" bolt, 2 of these gold zinc 1/2" washers, and a large 5/8 nut that will fit over top of that bolt. This may or may not be assembled in your bolt pack, but you should be able to easily find and identify all those items and then thread on the rib nut you plan to install. From there, you're going to want an impact with a 3/4" socket. You can press that into the hole. You'll then hold this larger nut with a 15/16 wrench. And then using your impact, you can tighten that up, which will kind of achieve the same thing, compressing that rib nut into the frame. Basically with that, when you hear your impact kind of labor like it's stopped, like you're tightening up a bolt, that's when you want to stop, back the bolt out, and just double check visually that it's fully seated on the frame material. Then moving back to this rear hole, just for ease of install, you can run that thread cutting bolt in now, so it's kind of pre-threaded and goes in by hand during the installation process. You can also use a 1/2-13 tap here if you have a tap and die set handy. Then moving back toward the front of the vehicle, this is on the side of the frame, basically just above the transmission crossmember. You can do the same thing in both of these holes. This will be the same on the driver and passenger side. These could also be done once the slider is in place, since you have some of that bottom hardware to kind of hold it and locate it. You can then grab the slider and do a little bit of prep work here. To identify which one goes on the driver and passenger side, you're just going to be looking for the two holes that you see here, kind of vertically in line with one another. That's the only spot on the slider that you're going to have that, and that is going to go toward the front of the vehicle. We can now move to getting this on the vehicle. Since we're working on a hoist, I'm going to lower this down. I'll cover up the hoist arms here and get this kind of slid partially into place so we can maneuver it over to the frame. Those of you doing this on the ground in your driveway or in your garage or whatever the case may be can kind of achieve the same thing we're going to using a floor jack and hopefully the help of a friend or two. With our slider now supported on our jack, you'll want to find the 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch long bolts with washers. We can then kind of get this lined up onto the frame. Pay attention to the cutout you see here in the bottom of the slider, as that will line up where the bracket was removed earlier on that kind of came and extended out toward the fuel tank. That'll help you locate this from front to rear as we're going up into position. As you're getting this hardware installed, remember to use your thread cutting bolt here on the rear hole, and then you can use this hardware to kind of carefully draw the slider up closer to the frame. However, we don't want everything tight until we get all the hardware in place. Then moving back out to the side, we'll grab those two thread cutters that go in the two vertically aligned holes. Just pay attention out here and make sure that you got the mounting bracket in behind these brake lines so you're not pinching them between the slider and the frame. With all that hardware in place, you'll now come down here to the remaining forwardmost hole on the bottom. This one we're going to have to drill out and install a 1/2 inch thread cutting bolt. However, here we're starting from scratch without a pilot hole. So you'll want to grab a center punch and a hammer, and first come as close as you can to the center of the slot. And with your center punch mark made, you want to start with a small pilot drill. I believe this is an 1/8 inch bit here. With our pilot hole drilled, we'll then need to open this up to 7/16 to accept that thread cutting bolt. We're going to achieve this with a step bit or a unibit. You could do the same thing by just stepping up with multiple sizes of conventional drill bits. Now what we found when drilling this is there is another layer of material up inside of this factory frame, roughly 3/4 of an inch up. So we stepped up to a larger unibit. We're going to give that a try, but again, we may have to finish this up with a standard twist drill. Once you have that drilled out, take your thread cutting bolt and your impact, and you can get this threaded in. With that thread cutter now installed, you'll want to go ahead and tighten everything up to pull the slider both up and into the frame, and then find your 5 inch long 1/2 inch bolts. This one's going to go in the slotted hole here just behind the second leg of your slider. You'll push this all the way through to the inside of the frame, where you'll likely encounter another plastic hole plug that will need to be removed. You can either push it out with the bolt or get back in here with your pry tool and pop it out just like previously in this installation. Once you move here to the inside of the frame, you'll want to install one of the larger 3/4 washers, followed by a 1/2-inch washer and a nylock nut to cover up that rectangle hole. As you go to tighten this up, you just need to be aware that you're not tightening against a solid surface here. There's a chance this frame compresses just a little bit under the load of the bolt. So just use your discretion here a little bit. Make sure you get the slider pulled nice and tight to the frame, but don't cause any major distortion as you're tightening this up. Now moving back out to the side of the frame rail, we'll come all the way to the back of our slider and repeat that same process with another 5-inch long 1/2-inch bolt. Just like before, this one should likely have a plastic plug on the inside, and you'll install your 3/4 washer, 1/2-inch washer, and nylock nut. Then the remaining 2 slotted holes here on the side will get 2 more of those 1/2-inch thread cutting bolts. Just like the one we did on the bottom, these have no pilot holes, so you'll have to center punch and drill these out. If you have one available to you, a right angle drill like you see here will be incredibly beneficial for these 2 hole locations. By now you probably already know, but again, as a reminder, we'll drill these to 7/16. With both of those drilled out, you can now get those thread cutting bolts installed. You can then reinstall your ground strap here into the side of the frame reusing factory hardware, as well as that lower gas tank bracket. Then come back up toward the front of the mount and just double check your brake line clearance here between the slider and the lines. If you have to pry on these in any way to manipulate them, we're going to recommend a plastic pry tool like you see here, but you should be able to get a hold of these with your hands. Kind of hold the clip that's hidden up behind here and just support the line there, and then pull out ever so slightly to create any clearance needed here. So as you finish things up over there and come on over to the driver's side, the installation is going to be pretty much identical. The only real difference is you won't have the brake lines to contend with on this front side of the mount, and you won't have that ground strap in the center that has to be removed and reinstalled. Once you have both sides installed, for those of you who purchased the step plates, we can move on to the installation of those. Before you put the step plates on, you're going to want to find the adhesive rubber pads. You're going to have triangles and rectangles, 1 triangle on each end of the slider, and then you'll have 3 of these that go down in the center. These are pretty straightforward. They're just adhesive backed, so you peel the backing and stick them down. Be sure to wipe your slider down, make sure it's clean and free of any dust, dirt, debris, and use a residue-free cleaner. And then it's just a matter of lining up the slotted hole and sticking those down into place. Now the step plates are made up of 2 pieces. These are mirrored parts, so simply flip it if it doesn't look like it's lining up. Once you have them in the correct orientation, it's really pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of laying them down on the slider, lining up the mounting holes with the slotted holes in the slider itself, and then you'll install the black 1/4 button head bolts with washers and serrated flange nuts from underneath. In the center where both panels meet, you'll have a 1/2 circle cutout on each panel. Just go ahead and make sure those are both lined up before you get your hardware installed. After you get all that hardware started loosely by hand, you can grab a 5/32 hex and tighten things up. You may want to start with your kind of center and outer hardware on each individual panel and then come into the center ones here, just to prevent these from trying to misalign when they're being tightened. Once you have that hardware tightened up, this installation is complete. So if you guys have any questions at all about this slider install, the step plate install, or anything else we offer here at Victory 4x4, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always email us at info@victory4x4.com or call us at 269-459-8447.